My family rejected me for 28 years for being a girl. But now that I'm pregnant, they come back, demanding my baby carry their last name, so my golden child brother can have an heir. And the inheritance they offered left me speechless. I'm 28 years old. I live in California. I'm pregnant with my first child, with my husband Daniel, and my biological family, after years of completely ignoring me. Now wants my baby to have their last name to solve my brother's fertility issues. Yes, you read that right. Let me explain this insanity from the beginning. Because it's a story that honestly sounds so ridiculous that sometimes I can't even believe it myself. I guess I should start at the very beginning. Even before I was born. Turns out, my mom didn't want me. And when I say she didn't want me, it's not that she was nervous about being a mother or anything like that. It's that she literally tried to terminate the pregnancy when she found out I was a girl. I found this out like 6 years ago when my Aunt Linda, my mom's sister, got drunk at Christmas and spilled the whole story. Apparently, my mom was obsessed with having only sons. Like, she had this weird thing about women being weak or a burden or I don't know what bullshit she made up in her head. And when the ultrasound showed I was a girl, my mom wanted to abort. My dad convinced her not to, but not because he wanted me specifically, but because they already had everything planned to have 2 children, and he wanted to fulfill this perfect family image he had in his mind. So I was born, but basically as a tolerated accident. You know what I mean? My brother Lucas is 30 years old, 2 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, he was the golden child of the family. Everything Lucas did was perfect. He was brilliant. He was special. He was the future of the family. I, on the other hand, was invisible at best, and a nuisance at worst. I'm not exaggerating when I say that my parents treated Lucas like he was a prince destined for great things, while I was basically the backup servant. Lucas had his own big room with a computer, video game console, everything he asked for. I shared a small room with boxes of old stuff until I was like 12, and they finally let me use the guest room. But only because Aunt Linda threatened to call social services when she came to visit and saw where I was sleeping. The thing is that Lucas wasn't just the favorite. He was actively cruel to me, and my parents allowed it or directly ignored it. When we were like 10 and 8 years old, respectively, Lucas pushed me down the stairs and I broke my arm. I told my mom that Lucas had pushed me, and she yelled at me for being a liar, said I was clumsy and dramatic, and Lucas just stood there with that little smile that I can still see in my mind. Another time, when I was like 14 years old, Lucas deleted my final computer science project the night before it was due. A project I had worked on for 3 months. When I started crying and told my dad what had happened, my dad told me to stop blaming others for my irresponsibility, and that Lucas would never do something like that. Lucas was literally laughing in the other room. I could hear him. The school thing was another level of shit. I was a good student, like really good, but it was never enough. Lucas got BS and CS, and my parents celebrated it like he had discovered the cure for cancer. I got A's, and maybe I'd get a dry good or directly nothing. I remember that in my sophomore year of high school, I won a state writing award, something that only like 5 students in all of Illinois achieved each year, and my mom didn't even go to the ceremony. She said she had to take Lucas to his soccer practice, which, by the way, Lucas didn't even want to go. He told me himself later that he didn't care, but Mom insisted. My dad didn't go either because he had to work, or so he said. But then I found out through my cousin Claire that same day, he went to lunch with Lucas to celebrate that he had passed a math test with a 75%. A 75. Seriously. All of this destroyed me for years. Honestly. I spent my entire adolescence feeling like I was defective, like there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made my own parents unable to love me. I went to therapy at school secretly because I knew that if my parents found out, they would say I was being dramatic or seeking attention. The school counselor was the first person who told me that none of this was my fault, that I wasn't broken, that my family was sick. Those words saved me, honestly, because they helped me start planning my escape. I studied like crazy the last 2 years of high school with one goal in mind: get a full scholarship to a university as far away from Illinois as possible. I applied to like 20 universities on the West Coast, all with strong software engineering programs because I knew that career would give me quick financial independence. When the acceptance letters came in the spring of my senior year, I got full scholarship offers from 3 universities in California. I chose the University of San Diego, and it was the best decision of my life, no exaggeration. I told my parents I was going to California for college, and they basically shrugged. My mom said something like, "Well, At least we won't have to pay for your college. And my dad said he hoped I wouldn't bother them asking for money because they weren't going to give me anything. Lucas, of course, was applying to state universities in Illinois, and my parents were already talking about paying for everything, dorm included, even though the university was only 2 hours from home. The hypocrisy was so obvious it was almost funny, but by that point I was so focused on getting out of there that I didn't even bother fighting. I left for California in August 2015. I had just turned 18, and it was like being able to breathe for the first time in my life. Literally. The first few months, I was like in shock at how different everything was. People were kind. Professors took me seriously. I made friends who were genuinely interested in me. And then I met Daniel in my intro to programming class in my second year. Daniel was, and is everything my family never was: kind, considerate, genuinely interested in what I think and feel. We started as study buddies, and by the end of that year, we were already dating. The craziest thing is that when I met Daniel's family, I realized what it really meant to have a family that loves you. His parents welcomed me with open arms from the beginning. They asked me how I was. They were interested in my career. They included me in their plans. The first Christmas I spent with them, in 2017, Daniel's mom bought me gifts. Real gifts thought out for me, not like those generic shit things my mom gave me when she remembered. I started crying, opening a sweater that Daniel's mom had knitted herself because I said once that I was always cold. Daniel hugged me, and his mom thought she had done something wrong. But I explained to her that it was the first time in my life that someone gave me a gift that showed they really listened to me and cared about me. My parents, by the way, never came to California to visit me in those 4 years of college. Not once. I went back to Illinois for Christmas a couple of times the first years. But the visits were so awkward and cold that I eventually stopped going. I spent the holidays with Daniel and his family, and honestly, it was 1,000 times better. Lucas texted me occasionally, usually to ask me for something or to criticize some photo I uploaded to Facebook. But other than that, it was like I didn't exist to them. My college graduation was in May 2019. I graduated with honors, got an amazing job at a tech company in San Francisco that paid like $95,000 a year starting, and I was super excited. I sent the invitation to my graduation to my parents like 2 months before. You know what they responded? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not even a text message saying they couldn't go. I wrote to them later asking if they had received the invitation, and my mom responded with an, "Oh yes, I don't think we can go. It's too far and too expensive." Then I found out through Claire, my cousin who always kept me informed of things, that my parents had gone to Las Vegas that same week for Lucas's birthday. I mean, they had money and time to go partying with Lucas to Nevada, but not to see their daughter graduate from a prestigious university with honors. Daniel's family went to my graduation. His parents, his sister, even his grandmother, who was like 80 years old and had trouble traveling, they applauded me, took pictures of me, took me to dinner to celebrate, cried with pride. That was my real family, I realized that day. People who share your blood aren't necessarily your family. Your family is the people who decide to stay, who support you, who celebrate your achievements. Daniel and I got engaged in December 2020. It was during the pandemic, a simple proposal in our apartment in San Francisco, but it was perfect. I was super excited and, I don't know why, I still had that stupid hope that maybe my family would be happy for me. I sent a message to the family group chat with a photo of the ring and announcing that we were engaged. The response? My mom put a thumbs up emoji. That was it. My dad didn't respond at all. Lucas wrote, "Cool," like 3 days later. Meanwhile, Daniel's parents organized an engagement dinner for us, bought us champagne. They were making plans for the wedding, asking me what I wanted, offering to help with whatever we needed. We got married in August 2021, a small beach wedding in San Diego with like 50 people. I sent the invitation to my parents and Lucas 6 months in advance. They responded that they were going to come. My mom even sent me a message asking about the dress code, so I thought that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be there. 2 weeks before the wedding, Lucas called me. He told me that he had convinced my parents not to go to the wedding because I was an ungrateful person who never appreciated anything they did for me. I asked him what the fuck I had ever done for me, and he yelled at me that I owed them respect and that I was breaking up the family. I asked my parents directly if it was true, and my dad confirmed that they weren't going to go, that Lucas was right, that I had always been selfish, and that until I apologized for my attitude, they didn't want anything to do with me. Apologize? For what? For existing? I got married without my biological family present. At first, it hurt so much that it almost ruined the day, but Daniel reminded me of something that helped a lot. He told me, "Look around you. All these people are here because they love you, because they want to celebrate with you. This is your real family." And he was right. The wedding was beautiful. I was surrounded by people who genuinely loved me. And the absence of my parents and Lucas was noticeable only because I knew they should be there. But no one else missed them. Here's where the story gets even crazier if that's possible. Like a year after our wedding, in 2022, Lucas married Jessica, a girl he had met at work. My parents organized a huge wedding for him, like 200 people, at a super expensive venue in Chicago. They paid for everything, absolutely everything. Then, as a wedding gift, they bought Lucas and Jessica a house. A whole house, like a 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood that easily cost like $400,000. Claire sent me photos and updates of everything, and I honestly wasn't even surprised anymore. The contrast couldn't be more obvious. They didn't even come to my wedding. They bought Lucas a house. I cut off contact completely after that. I blocked my parents everywhere, blocked Lucas, deleted the family group chat. The only connection I kept was with Claire, because she was the only person in that family who always treated me like a human being. Claire told me things occasionally, not because I asked, but because she felt I should know certain things, and that's how I found out what happened next. Turns out, Lucas and Jessica started having problems having kids like a year after getting married. At first, they thought it was timing or stress or whatever, but after like 2 years trying without success, they went to get fertility tests. The results showed that Lucas had serious fertility problems, like his counts were super low, and the quality too. And the doctors basically told them that the chances of having a biological child naturally were almost zero. There were options like IVF with IC or using a sperm donor. But Lucas apparently flatly refused to consider a donor. Here's where my parents showed their true face even more. According to Claire, when they found out that Lucas couldn't have biological children, they became absolutely obsessive about the grandchildren thing. My mom, who all her life had been so cold and cruel, was suddenly desperate to have a biological grandchild from the family. They started pressuring Lucas and Jessica constantly about fertility treatments, offering to pay for whatever was necessary. Jessica was having a horrible time because she felt all that pressure, and Claire told me she had heard Jessica crying on the phone with her mom, saying she felt like a failure for not being able to give my parents what they wanted. But the sickest thing about all this is that my parents literally started treating Lucas differently for the first time in his life. The golden child who could never do anything wrong was suddenly receiving cold comments and looks of disappointment from my parents. My dad, who had always talked about Lucas as the one who would continue the family surname and the legacy and all that patriarchal shit, was now bitter because his precious son turned out not to be able to fulfill that function. My mom, obsessed with her imaginary biological grandchildren, started making passive-aggressive comments about how Lucas should try harder or try this or that. Claire told me that family dinners became super tense. My parents basically interrogated Lucas and Jessica about fertility treatments, if they had tried this or that, what the doctors said, when they were going to give them results. Lucas, who all his life had been the king who never received criticism, was now experiencing for the first time the disappointment and rejection of my parents. The irony wasn't lost on me at all. The son who could do whatever he wanted without consequences was now being treated like a disappointment just because his body didn't work a certain way. Just like they had treated me all my life, just for being a girl. Things escalated even more when my parents, according to Claire, threatened to cut Lucas off financially if he didn't fix his fertility problem. Yes, you read that right. They told him they were going to stop helping him with house payments, with his credit cards that they paid, with everything, unless he had a child. Lucas was devastated because basically his entire adult life had been subsidized by my parents and he didn't know how to function without that support. Jessica was furious because it wasn't fair to punish them for something medical that no one could control. While all this was happening, Daniel and I were living our best life in California. I had gotten a promotion at my job and was making like $140,000 a year. Daniel was doing well in his career too. We had bought our own apartment in San Francisco, and we decided we were ready to have a baby. I got pregnant in January of this year, 2025. We didn't tell anyone, except Daniel's family and some close friends during the first few months, because we wanted to wait until we were sure everything was going well. In March, when I was like 14 weeks pregnant, Something happened that I still can't believe. I was at home on a Saturday afternoon. Daniel had gone out to play basketball with some friends, and suddenly, someone rings the doorbell. I go to open it thinking it's an Amazon delivery or something, and there's Lucas standing at my door. I hadn't seen him in person in years, like since before I left for California, and the first thing I thought was, what the fuck is he doing here? He didn't even know where I lived exactly, but apparently Claire had given him my address when he told her he needed to talk to me urgently. Lucas looked terrible. Honestly. Like gaunt, with dark circles, nervous. He asked me to let him in to talk. Part of me wanted to close the door in his face, but another part was curious about what was so urgent that he had traveled like 2,000 miles to show up unannounced. I let him in and we sat in the living room. He started with the typical, I know we haven't talked in a long time and I know things between us aren't good and all that obvious shit. Then he got to the point. He told me that he and Jessica couldn't have children. I already knew from Claire, but I acted like it was new information. He started crying, like really crying, saying that mom and dad were pressuring him horribly, that he felt he had failed as a son, that his marriage was suffering from all the pressure. I sat there not knowing what to say because part of me felt some sympathy, but most of me was thinking about the irony of the whole situation. I finally asked him why he was telling me all this specifically, and that's when he dropped the most ridiculous bomb I've ever heard in my life. And he told me that Claire had told him I was pregnant. I was furious about that because Claire knew we weren't announcing the pregnancy yet, but well, the damage was already done. Lucas continued telling me that he had been thinking about a solution that could help everyone. He asked me, and I swear these were his exact words, if I would consider giving my baby the family last name instead of Daniel's last name. I sat there trying to process what I had just heard. I asked him to repeat what he had just said because surely I had misunderstood. And he repeated it, with complete seriousness. He said that if my baby had the family last name, technically that would fulfill Dad's desire to continue the last name, and that would make Mom and Dad relax with all the pressure on him. He said they would even pay me. Like my parents were willing to give me money if I agreed to this. I don't know if I laughed or if I screamed. Honestly, everything was like a blur for a moment. I told him if he was completely crazy, why the fuck would he think I would do something like that? Lucas started getting desperate, saying that I didn't understand the pressure he was living under, that Mom and Dad were going to cut him off completely, that Jessica was going to leave him, that he needed my help. I told him that all that wasn't my problem, that he had had a whole life of privileges and favoritism, and that now that for the first time things weren't perfect for him, he couldn't come running to ask me for help. The sister he had ignored and mistreated for years. He started getting angry then. He told me that I had always been selfish, that I thought about the family, that this was the least I could do after everything Mom and Dad had done for me. And that's when I really laughed. I told him to specify exactly what Mom and Dad had ever done for me. I reminded him that Mom literally wanted to abort when she found out I was a girl, that I spent my entire childhood being invisible while he was adored, that he destroyed my science project and left me with a broken arm without consequences, that my parents didn't go to my college graduation or my wedding but paid for all his education, his wedding, and bought him a house. I told him that I didn't owe them or him anything, and that my child wasn't going to be used as a pawn to solve their problems. Lucas tried another angle then. He started with how he and Jessica could formally adopt my baby, that they would raise him as their own, that I could continue with my life without the burden of a child. I stared at him, unable to believe he had really just suggested I give him my baby. I told him to get out of my house immediately before I called the police. He started begging, literally on his knees begging me to help him. I told him no, to get out, and he finally left. He left yelling that I was a selfish bitch and that I was going to regret this. I called Daniel immediately and told him everything. Daniel was furious and wanted to go find Lucas to, I don't know, beat him up or something, but I convinced him to just block Lucas from everything and have no more contact. I called Claire too and told her I couldn't believe she had told Lucas about my pregnancy. Claire started crying, saying she was so sorry, that Lucas had pressured her horribly, telling her it was a family emergency and that he needed my help, and that she thought she was doing the right thing. I told her I understood, but that I couldn't trust her with private information after this. 2 weeks after that, I received an email from my dad. The first direct contact I had with him in years. The email was long and basically said the same thing as Lucas, but with more convoluted words and a ton of emotional manipulation. He talked about family legacy, about the importance of the last name, about how this would be a way for me to finally contribute to the family, about how Mom and Dad would forgive me for everything if I did this. He also mentioned that they were willing to include me in their will if I cooperated, that I could receive up to a third of the family inheritance if I agreed. The audacity of thinking I would sell my unborn child for money was incredible. I didn't respond to the email. I showed it to Daniel and my in-laws as evidence of how sick my family was, and then I archived it. A week later, my mom called me. I didn't have her number blocked on her phone because I had changed my number since the last time we talked, so the call went through. I answered without thinking and found myself listening to my mom for the first time in years. She started relatively calmly, asking me how I was, how the pregnancy was, pretending to be interested. Then she slowly went toward the real reason for her call. She told me that Lucas was suffering, that as a mother I should understand the importance of giving children to your parents, that she had sacrificed a lot raising Lucas and me. But that's where I interrupted her. I told her that she hadn't sacrificed anything for me, that she had made it clear to me all my life that I wasn't wanted, that she didn't even want me when I was in her womb. She was silent for a moment and then started crying. She started with how she had always loved me, that I was misinterpreting her way of showing love, that I was being unfair to her. I told her to remember that I knew she had tried to abort when she found out I was a girl, that Aunt Linda had told me everything. That's when her tone changed completely. She got furious. She yelled at me that I was a brat, that after everything they had done for me, keeping me with a roof and food, for 18 years, I couldn't do this small favor of using their last name for my baby. I yelled back at her that that was the legal minimum that parents must do, that it wasn't a special favor that deserved eternal gratitude, and that my child wasn't going to be used to solve their sick obsession with biological grandchildren who would continue their precious last name. She told me I was going to regret it, that someday I would need them, and they wouldn't help me. I told her I had never received help from them anyway, so I wasn't losing anything. She hung up, yelling that I was dead to her. I blocked her number immediately. I blocked my dad's email. I told Claire that I didn't want to know anything more about what was happening with that family. I finally established the boundaries I should have established years before. Daniel and his parents supported me completely. Daniel's mom told me something that stuck with me. She told me that true freedom comes when you decide you don't owe anything to the people who gave you life but didn't give you love. According to the last thing I know from Claire, before asking her to stop updating me, my parents fulfilled their threat and cut Lucas off financially. They lost the house because they couldn't pay the mortgage without my parents' help. Jessica left Lucas because she couldn't stand all the pressure and family drama anymore. Lucas moved back in with my parents, but apparently things there are super tense because my parents constantly throw in his face his failure of not being able to give them grandchildren. It's sad, I guess. But it's also the natural result of having built your entire life around being the favorite without developing your own identity or resources. My baby was born like 3 weeks ago. A beautiful boy named Oliver. He has Daniel's last name, and he's perfect. Daniel's family is super involved, excited, supporting us in everything. I'm on my maternity leave. Daniel is doing remote work to spend more time at home, and we're in our happy bubble of new family. There's no room for toxic people in my son's life, no matter if they share blood with me or not. Sometimes I think about how it would be if things had been different, if my parents had loved me even a little bit, if Lucas hadn't been so cruel. But then I look at my current life, my incredible husband, my in-laws who are better parents to me than my biological parents ever were, my perfect son, my successful career that I built on my own, and I realize that I came out of all that and built something beautiful despite them, not thanks to them. That's what matters in the end.